Good evening and welcome to the Gersnet Weekly Podcast. It's Sunday the 7th of April. This is the Sunday night show. It's 9:30. If you are watching on catch up, then you might have come down from what was a very interesting day supporting Rangers. This is episode 326 of the Gersnet Podcast. My name is John McCallum. This is the independent Rangers podcast made by fans for fans, where the content is, of course, free. Now, it's not just the podcast we have on Gersnet. We have a very friendly forum. We have articles with social media, and there's a wonderful history archive. So, if you enjoy the pod, we would encourage you to subscribe and share on social media, or just tell your neighbours. The more people who listen, the better. Now, on tonight's show, we'll try and make some sense of this afternoon's match. We'll have a look at all of the goals, even the ones that didn't stand. We'll question our lineup, some individual and collective performances, and I guess we'll ask the big question, which is, was that a point gained or 2 points dropped? And if we've time, we'll look ahead to the Dundee game midweek and our chance to go back top of the table. Now, before we do any of that, I just have to mention our sponsors, who are Forrest Precision Engineering, a subcontract Glasgow-based engineering company, and they've been a big commercial supporter of Rangers for many, many years, and we are delighted that they are backing the pod. Now, you can find out more about Forrest Precision Engineering by visiting their website, which is forrestprecisioneng.com, or if you want, you can actually have a look at the Forrest Precision Executive Lounge, which is a stunning hospitality area in the main stand at Ibrox. If you would like more information on that and the opportunity to perhaps book it, contact the club directly on hospitality@rangers.co.uk. Okay, there's a meme on the internet. You've all seen it. There's this meme, and it's like 20-25 seconds long, and it's like an English pub. And it starts off with this drunk lassie, and she's kind of doing this really bad dancing, and then some old bloke goes past with a stick and an unlit fag. And then a guy, a mental looking guy, comes in. He's got a big woolly hat on, a big jacket on, even though he's indoors. And he's kind of stomping, and he kind of stomps in, and then a midget strolls by. Just out the blue, this midget strolls by. And then there's another lassie, and she's got a broken leg and a cast in her leg, and it's just madness, total madness. But you can't keep your eyes off it. You keep looking at it. And today was a bit like that. You know, the first half today was like the worst days of Pedro Coutinho. It was horrendous, the first half. I don't have words for how bad we were in that first half. And then the second half, we should have won the match. We were so dominant. And, you know, we saw some horrific defending, some terrible VAR, some interesting VAR interventions, freak goals, good goals chalked off, and as good a finish as you're going to ever see. So, I don't know, you know, I'm joined tonight obviously by Dougie and Rob, and I'm not entirely sure what we're going to speak about first. I'm at a slight loss as to just how this is all going to go tonight, but I guess where I want to start, and I'll start with you, Bob. I think where I want to start is, and I know hindsight is brilliant, I know with hindsight you can look back at everything, but when the starting lineup came out, and we saw the starting team, it was fairly obvious that we had a lack of width in our team, with Silva and Wright starting, and I couldn't decide. Obviously, with Seaman on the bench, and McCausland on the bench, and Matondo on the bench, I couldn't decide if that was just, you know, none of the three of them he felt were fit enough to start the match, or whether this was a tactical decision based on how he expected Celtic to play. But that was an interesting one. Cantwell was on the bench. Lawrence started. I didn't necessarily disagree with that. I think Lawrence has actually been in decent form. I think he's been doing okay. Cantwell's, you know, been out injured for a while. He's not played a lot of football, so I wasn't particularly surprised at that. I was surprised there was no Roof and no Raskin on the bench, because both apparently are fit. Both were at the ground today, but didn't make the match day squad. As I said, hindsight's great. You know, we can look back now and we saw how the game went, and you know what worked and what didn't work. But what were your thoughts, Bob, when you saw that starting lineup at the beginning?
I think, like you just said, John, there was probably a couple of surprises there. I think the main one being Wright coming into the team. The thing that I will say is, I think though Clement as a manager has earned the trust of the fans when it comes to these selections. But I think even himself will probably admit that he maybe got that starting team wrong today. I was surprised that actually, if he was fit and could have played, that Bonner wasn't playing at left back, because ultimately I think that would have given us a bit more balance with him being a natural left footer, which would have allowed you to push Dujon Sterling up into that right wing position where Wright was playing. But you're right, you could understand the thinking with the reason why he's maybe started Lawrence over Cantwell, because Lawrence probably is going to give you a bit more work in the middle of the park. And certainly the games that we've had so far against them this season, we've been overrunning midfield. Unfortunately, it only took us 20 seconds to not even settle into the game, but then question what the hell the manager was doing right for the start, given the disastrous opening to the game. But I think there was a few surprises, but you saw the difference that Sima and Matondo made when they come on, and I think the frustration is that Sima's coming back from a long injury. Is he better to come off the bench and make an impact there when Celtic players are tired? Or do you have him on at the start? It's a hard thing to balance and a hard thing to get right. But I think it's probably given the manager a clear indication on who he can really trust in some of these games. But yeah, there was a few surprises in that lineup, I think.
I think if he doesn't know by now he can't trust Wright, then I will be very surprised. Wright's had half a dozen good performances for Rangers. And beyond that, he is a bit part player. He's a guy who you can bring off the bench when the team is tiring. If you do need to change things up. I turned to my son and said, when I saw the starting lineup, I said it's a wee bit depressing that Wright's starting. I'm going to come to Dougie just now and have a chat about the actual first goal. Now, Wright wasn't to blame at the first goal. He pretty much couldn't put the blame on Wright for that. But I did think in the first half there was a number of times where Tav was left exposed. He didn't seem to have a forward pass. He didn't seem to have an out ball. They were closing us down very, very quickly, and he didn't seem to have anywhere to go. And I couldn't help but feel, well, that's because Wright's in front of him and he isn't doing the job he needs to do. And the fact that he got hooked at half time was a surprise to nobody. The fact he lasted till half time was probably the only surprise for me. Cantwell not starting, what did you make of that, Bob? Why did you feel that decision was made, and was it the right decision?
I think, like I said, mate, it's probably because he felt that Lawrence was going to give him a bit more of a presence in the middle. Cantwell, while he's a fantastically technically gifted player, is he going to give you the work rate in the middle of that pitch that you're going to need to gain a foothold in a game like this? And ultimately, the answer's probably no. The tracking back and the effort, the dirty stuff that needs to be done in some of these games, Clement's probably felt that Lawrence would have given him that. Now, as it transpired, I don't think anybody in that first half covered themselves in glory, the way that we performed. So it doesn't really matter what your starting lineup is at that point, because ultimately, if everybody's having a nightmare, you're kind of on a hide into nothing. I think the number 10 position is going to be interesting moving forward, because ultimately I love Cantwell. I think he's a fantastic player, and I think he's got the ability to influence the top end of the pitch probably more than Lawrence does. We just need to get him back to full fitness and get him back into that team on a regular basis, and ultimately cause them more problems than we try and nullify their threats. And I think that was indicative of how we played the first half. We seemed to be a hell of a lot more worried about them today in that first half than they were worried about us, and you could see it with the difference in pressing. They got the ball at a goal kick. We were quite happy to let their two centre halves play up to the halfway line. We get it at a goal kick. They were on top of us straight away, not giving us any time or space. Yeah, and that was the difference in that first half. I felt that whether that's starting lineup, whether it's the players taking time to settle in, whether we can use the excuse of the wind, the simple fact of the matter was there wasn't enough effort, there wasn't enough desire from that team in the first half, and it's probably taken a big kick up the backside second half to get them to come out and play a little bit better.
Anyway, Bob, you've just answered the next three questions there. I'm still asking you about that starting line up there.
Sorry.
Dougie, it was literally the worst possible start. 22 seconds. I hope you were late for the match and you missed it. But if you weren't and I wasn't, then you got to see a just bizarre goal. A freak goal in some ways, but also a goal that kind of set the scene for the first half. I guess what I'm trying to get to here is, who was at fault? Sterling gave away possession. We took the bloody centre. How do you lose a goal in 22 seconds when you took centre? We took centre and Sterling gave away possession. And I've watched it a few times. Initially, I was furious at him. I thought he just kind of panicked. Looking at it again, it looks like maybe he slipped and he was trying to play it up to Silva, and it looks like maybe he slipped or something. I don't know. Only he knows what happened there. But he gave away possession, and then again, watching it again, I think Butland Tav's expecting Butland to come for it. I think Tav's misread the run of the ball. I think he thinks it's going faster than it is. I think he thinks it's going to make it to Butland. Butland's going to come out his box and clear it, or come to the edge of the box or something. By the time it's obvious that he isn't, and Tav has to go for it, the Celtic boys get the run on him and is closing him down awful quickly. But even then, Tav's still first to that ball, and it's an utter freak goal. I mean, it cannons off that boy and goes in at the back of the net. And, he couldn't have hit it that hard if he tried. Total freak goal. What did you make of it? I mean, who are we blaming here? We're blaming everybody, but there's three of them to blame there. Is it all on Tav? What did you make of it? Who should we hang out to dry first of all on this one, Dougie? The floor is yours.
It was Scott Wright's fault.
Yeah, well, I'll second that.
No, I'm only joking. So first of all, unfortunately, I did make it into the ground early, so I did see the goal. I had a great angle of it from Copeland. The goal was entirely James Tavernier's fault, so I'll start with that. But it was interesting. Rob had mentioned about Sterling playing left back, but as a right footer. Craig had mentioned it last week as well, it being one of his concerns around Sterling starting at left back. I actually think the clearance or the pass, whatever it was from Sterling, wasn't natural to him, the angle that he was at, and I think a left footer would have had a more natural pass up the park. So I do think that played a factor. But having said that, Sterling had an absolutely fantastic game at left back, and I think that needs said before I kind of carry on. So I think Sterling's pass was very sloppy. To give it away so early in the game, it's just so poor management of the game. And I think that's what we've seen in the first half. We just managed the game so poorly. And I think that kind of summed up how easy we gave the ball away. It's one straight kick up the park though from Joe Hart, and we were speaking just before we came on about the wind. The wind's a huge factor. At the game, I was actually thinking...
Did you think the wind held the ball up, Dougie?
Well, at the game, I was actually thinking, has the wind held the ball up? Butland's came off his line. Tav's kind of stopped his run. At the time, I'm behind the goal. I'm thinking, has the ball been caught in the wind? And that's where Tav's kind of been caught in no man's land. When you watch it back, it hasn't. It hasn't really impacted. But where I do think it's impacted is, I think when Tav has eventually got to the ball, I think Tav has hesitated about putting it back to Butland because of the wind. I think it's been a factor in his decision making around what to do when he gets it, and ultimately he's went to clear it out the park. And it's, as you say, John, it's a freak goal in terms of Maeda's put his foot out, Tav's kicked it against him. See from where we're at, the power of that going past Butland's frightening. As you said, Maeda couldn't kick it that hard.
No.
If he tried. It's freak. But the blame is entirely on Tav because, like I said, he is sleeping there. The one thing about that Celtic front three that they have is pace. From the very first second of that game, as we've seen, they were on top of our defenders. I don't understand why that was a surprise to Tav. How many times has Tav been up against Maeda? Maeda is a player that puts in the work rate. He's got the pace. For me, that's not a surprise how that front three played. So early in the game, you should be retaining possession, playing it safe, adjusting, settling into the game, and on that occasion, taking no risks. The miscommunication between Tav and Butland is Tav's fault. It's not Butland's fault. We don't expect Butland to be coming out his 18-yard box that far out of it for a ball in these conditions. So it's entirely on Tav. And I've got to say, having praised Tav on last week's episode after becoming Britain's all-time greatest goal-scoring defender, that's the worst performance I've seen from James Tavernier in a Rangers jersey. That goal summed up his performance today. We'll come on and talk about the penalty. Fantastic penalty. But other than the penalty, that was a very, very poor James Tavernier. Unfortunately, do you know, I was thinking about it earlier on. That was his Stevie G slippy moment in the Liverpool big crucial game. With big crucial game like that, you need your leaders to stand up, and unfortunately, James Tavernier let us down today.
I think he was definitely at fault for that goal. I mean, I think Sterling gave the ball away. Butland was hesitant, but ultimately, even if Butland had come screaming out, Tav's the captain. You know, if he's under any concerns, get rid of it. You know, and he did. He hesitated. He took too long, and it was an utter freak goal. The thing is, Bob, I don't know if that goal set the scene for what came after it, or whether the goal was symptomatic of how Celtic were going to play in the first half anyway. Because there's no getting away from the fact that Celtic were better. They were closing us down really, really well. They were preventing us from playing our normal game. The number of times Goldson just gave the ball away today, just passed the ball, didn't even pass the ball. I mean, let's be honest, he was punting it and just giving it away. I don't remember the last time. He's had a few games where he's been trying to hit the long diagonals, and sometimes they come off and they're quite helpful, but today they were just, the first half in particular, were just terrible. But Celtic prevented us from playing what I would describe as our normal game today. Why did that happen? Did Celtic just get their tactics right? Did we not see it coming? Was our formation wrong? Was our midfield not working? I mean, I think you have to say the defence looked suspect at times. Sterling aside, who had a pretty good game, the other three all had moments, and Goldson and Tavernier in particular. But even Butland, and I'll come and talk about that later. None of them looked as assured as you would expect, the most experienced players in our team to be. The England manager was at the game today, and you know what? England have got a problem at centre half, but Conor Goldson ain't going to be the answer to it, I don't think, based on that performance today. So how did it happen? I mean, sometimes you just have to say the other team get their tactics right, the other team, knew how to come out against us, or was it all down to us, do you think?
I think probably a combination of everything, John, to be honest. I mean, the comment that I made to the guy sitting around me was that, Celtic were the ones that came out in that game with a bit between their teeth right from the start. I think they pressed us better. I mean, there was an instant in the first half where Dessers was trying to press, three players himself, and then turns around and holds his hands up as if to say, is anybody going to come and help me? And I think that was indicative of how we played that first half. It was disjointed. We lacked intensity. We weren't good in possession. We weren't good out of possession because some of the players were just kind of jogging back and not covering. It was an absolute car crash of a first half, and I think part of that is to do with the way that Celtic pressed us, absolutely, but it's the way that we let Celtic settle into the game. The one thing that we've always said, you've got to establish your dominance in these games early on. And we didn't lay a glove on them.
No.
That first half. You think back to some of the players that would have been in our good teams that would have went in there and hit one of them to let them know they were going to be in a game. There was none of that in that first half.
Not from us, there was from them.
Yeah.
I don't know, 3 or 4 of them booked. There could have been more. I mean, the big boy centre half was Vickers. Should have been booked for kicking the ball away as a poor referee decision. But there was from them, they let us know they were there.
Yeah, absolutely. And they continually targeted our weak links. That first half, anytime Maeda got the ball, you were scared for James Tavernier in that first half, because you just felt that there was another mistake waiting to happen. Goldson, like you said, it wasn't exactly his best performance today either. And I think if you look at it towards the end, whether Goldson has been carrying a knock or not, pretty telling that he's been subbed off for Balogun towards the end of that match. So there's something, whether he's come into that game not 100% fit, we're never gonna find that out. But I think it was a combination of us just not turning up for some reason, and a combination of Celtic just doing a better job at the dirty stuff than us. And it was that was the thing that really, really disappointed me. The way that we started, it wasn't as if this was a dead rubber game. This was giving us an opportunity to get back on top of the table with a game on Wednesday night to make us go 5 points clear, with the title in our own hands completely, regardless of what happened at the return fixture at their place after the split. And it was that lack of intensity and quality in the first half that really disappointed me. There's a period in the game where I think Diamandi has been great to win the ball, and then just passes it into the middle of the pitch to nobody, and Celtic just run on, pick it up, and it was like that time after time after time in that first half.
Yeah, it happened a few times in the game. It was very, very strange. Dougie, the second goal came along. The second goal was a penalty. Nicely taken penalty. Interesting thing about the penalty is that nobody claimed for it. Not one Celtic player claimed for that penalty. When you see it again, when they said there was a VAR check, I was unaware of what it was. When you see it again on the screens, you see the pictures of it. It definitely hits his elbow. Like all of these ones, when you see it in slow motion, you think, "Wow, come on!" But in actual time, I don't know. They're given. They're given these days. But what's he supposed to do? He's jumped. He's jumped in the air. The guy in front of him misses it. You can't get your arm out of the way. And that time's impossible. Any complaints about that penalty being given, or do you think it was fair enough?
I think we've been in the end of every small margin against us in every single Old Firm game of the season so far, and I think that's just another example. What you said's absolutely true, John, in terms of I'm sitting in Copeland. We have no idea why that's going to VAR. We're all talking amongst themselves as to what just happened there. Why is there a VAR check against a handball? Who handballed it? None of us seen it. I am right behind the goals. It's happened in the middle of the goals, so we've completely missed it. So, in that kind of natural time, supporters inside the ground, we've all completely missed it. I think when you watch it back and it's slowed down, it's a penalty. It's a penalty because under the rules, it's hit his arm, right? But it's exceptionally harsh. I'll tell you why it's harsh. The crosses came in, and at point blank range, Maeda's knocked it on in front of Connor Goldson. Anyone that's ever jumped in the air, never mind played football, knows that you need to use your arms as leverage to get off the ground.
You can't jump like that. It's not possible.
You can't jump like that. Connor Goldson's jumped up, expecting the ball to go one way, and at point blank range, the ball's been knocked on in front of him, and at split second, he's had to try and move his arms out the way to avoid contact. And what's very harsh about it is he's brought his arms into his body. Now, it so happens that his elbow's sticking out, and that's the reason why it's given. It's exceptionally harsh, and we'll come on and we'll talk about the goal that's chopped off. Likewise, very, very harsh. I think if we take our blue tinted glasses off, I think the referee had a good game overall. I think he got the big calls right. I don't think you can criticise the referee for giving that decision. I think it's a penalty under the laws of the game. The laws of the game are what's flawed here. That's not a penalty for me. It's not a penalty, but I'm not Michael Stewart. I don't go with my opinion. I go with the laws of the game, and unfortunately, under the laws of the game, for me, it's a penalty.
Dougie, I'm not Michael Stewart. Kinnear gives us his new name, a name we all would like, I think. Dougie, I'll stick with you. Was that the worst half of football we've played this season now? We get some bad performances under Beale, particularly towards the end. That first half against Limassol wasn't terribly good either, but we were terrible that first half, absolutely awful. I know it matters more when it's a big game like that, but was that the worst half of football you've seen us play this season?
Yeah, and arguably the worst half of football I've seen us play against Celtic. even through the banter years. You know,
I don't know about that. There was a few shockers.
Well, yeah, there
was.
The
days when we got hammered.
What was so poor about that today, though, is we lost our shape. You know, I was going to say discipline, right? It wasn't discipline in terms of challenges. It was your discipline in terms of what your roles were on the pitch. That's a title-chasing team today, John. That's a team who had the opportunity to go ahead in the league table and put yourselves 5 points clear on Wednesday. That performance today was embarrassing in the first half. I was furious at half-time. Yeah. In fact, I don't think my dad and I spoke to each other for the entire half-time. I think I just sat facing the ground. I was disgusted at half-time at that performance. It was... I've not felt that way about watching a Rangers team in a long time. There's been games going to Hampden, historically, where Celtic have turned us over, but those were really poor teams. That team today, you can question some of the decisions. I don't agree with some of the comments about the starting 11. I don't think that was a game for Tom Lawrence, for example, because of the press needed in that game and a lot of the working off the ball. I think it suits Todd Cantwell more. But I think there's some rumours about a bug doing the rounds within the dressing room, and we don't know who's impacted by it, whether it's true. It could be that the starting 11 has been selected based on availability and players' conditioning. We don't know. Everything was wrong today. And I go back to the starting 11. I think whether the manager predicted a different kind of layout of the game, he maybe predicted that we would be the team dominating possession at Celtic, would be looking for the draw, they would sit tight, that we'd be the team pressing hard, and I think he called it really wrong, because Celtic will never come and do that at Ibrox. They'll come and they'll press. That's what their game is. Their Achilles heel is their back four. They're not going to sit deep and allow their back four to be exposed. So I think there's a lot wrong with today. I think that 45 minutes is easily the worst, and I think it's just because everyone was just running like headless chickens. And I think the early goal is what done it. You may remember this. I don't remember this, but my dad was saying after the first goal went in that there was another Old Firm game back in the day that I think he said Frank McAvenny scored early doors to put Celtic 1-0 up. Rangers recovered from it and went on to win 5-1. We did not recover on the pitch in the first half. It was at half-time where we recovered. And I don't know if I'm segueing into another point, but whatever Philippe Clement had done it at half-time were absolute wonders. We all joked when he took over that he needed a magic wand. He done something magical at half-time because he made one change. You could have made an absolute handful of changes after that first half and nobody would have criticised the manager for making all 5 changes, for example. He changed one player. Scott Wright wasn't the only problem. He changed one player, but it's whatever he said at half-time, because the players instantly looked more relaxed when he came on in the second half. It was almost like we remembered how to play football. Clement keeps talking about the Rangers way, the DNA of how he plays football. We lost all that. Every player mentioned it as well. Dessers mentioned it, Matondo mentioned it. Post-match, they all said that the manager said, you've not played in the way that we play football. We lost our way. And I don't know why that happened. I don't know whether it was a goal, whether Celtic took us off guard, whether the wind was a factor. But that was a very, very poor first half. Very poor.
Well, you just said it there. We made one change at half-time, same one for Wright. And it did instantly feel different. 2-0's a funny lead with 45 minutes to go away from home. I mean, for all Celtic's dominance, and let's be honest with each other, none of us could have complained if we'd gone in 4-down. For Butland pulling off a couple of fantastic saves, we could easily have been 4-down. But we weren't, and 2-0's a funny lead. Do you stick or twist? Whereas, Rangers had no choice. Come out and play, your lives depend on it. It instantly felt different. What was different was Sima. That was the only actual difference. Sima coming back on, coming back in the team, ironically playing on the right and not his usual left. Was that all it was? Was that all that changed that happened, or was there something else happening tactically, or was it just that the players woke up, whatever had been said at half time, whatever. And influence the managerial team gave them at half time, it felt completely different, Bob.
Yeah, I think like Dougie said, it was as if they woke up and remembered that actually when we play football we can be a pretty decent team.
Yeah.
Because there was a marked improvement after the break. Now that's not all just down to Seema coming on, but I do think that it was probably the collective kick up the backside that the team have given themselves while they've been sitting in there. You'd like to think the likes of Butland, Tav, the leaders in the dressing room would be looking round and take responsibility and saying, "Look, boys, this isn't good enough." And Clement will be in there reminding them, the run that they've just been on where they've taken 30 points out of 33 available. Bad teams don't do that. And I think the first half was probably scar tissue for a lot of us that remember the early days of the season. But I think it was also a stark reminder just how good a job the manager's done since coming in and taking over. You look at that squad of players and where we were before he came in. The fact that we are sitting here and at the start of April talking about still being in a title race is down to him and his coaching team and what they've got out of those players, because they were devoid of confidence before he came in, and we were playing terribly under the previous manager. For us to, and I think it's important that we do a bit of reflection as well. In that time, we've talked to the group, we've got into the last 16, we've won the League Cup, we're in the semi of the Scottish Cup, and we're still in a title race. Now, while the first 45 was disappointing, the reaction in the second 45 was great to see, as we'll touch on in a wee minute. But I think it was more that the players probably gave themselves a good shake and actually then started to perform the way they should have done right from the get-go. And I think you're right, that 2-0 is always a bit of a dodgy lead, because all it takes is a little bit of momentum and it swings a different way, as we saw with a couple of topics that we will touch on. But I think to come away with a point at half time, everybody would have bitten your hand off for that. I think it's just the thing for me, and I still don't really know how I feel about the game today. I think it's just that first 45 is the thing that's really going to disappoint us. So yeah, Seema coming on for right, I think he gives us more presence on that right hand side. He will give a bit more cover to Tav and a bit more work rate on that right hand side than Wright would do, and he'll also be an option to hold the ball up because he's a bit stronger. So I think it allowed us to play down that right hand side a bit more often and mix it up a little bit than we probably did do when Wright was the option there.
Yeah. It's a good point you make, and it is something that I think we now have actually taken for granted. We're now largely forgotten. Is that other than Diamandi and Silva, that's the same team. These are the same players that we had at the start of the season when we were very, very poor. And maybe we'd forgotten that actually there are a few of them who need replaced. Clement is getting a game out of some of them but perhaps some of them just really aren't good enough. And what he's doing is remarkable. Look, Dougie, let's talk about the first goal. We've criticised Tav for his performance in the first half, quite rightly. We've criticised Tav for his performance in the first half. And I have to say, when he walked up to take the penalty, I was nervous. I was thinking, oh, this is good. I actually was feeling for him because I love Tav. But I was feeling for him, and I was thinking, oh no, this isn't. I said to my son, I said, no, this has got Tav's worst day written all over it. But it actually was a fantastic penalty. Keeper did it the right way, but two keepers weren't saving that. Fantastic penalty. The top corner really took it well. But let's be honest, it's not the penalty itself that's worth discussing just now. It's actually the build up to the penalty, the award of the penalty. Silva, we were joking before we came on there. Silva makes the most of going down. He is that kind of player, and I think it does annoy me a little bit because I don't think he has to. I think sometimes he's very clearly been fouled. And he was fouled in the first half when forget his name, Johnson, their fullback, got booked. And they clearly were having a go at Sima throughout the match. But for the penalty, I didn't. My first view of it, I didn't know, but I shouted for a penalty because he went down. And I shouted for a penalty, and I thought the ref had given it. And then it turns out the ref's not giving it. He's booking him, and you're thinking, geez, that's a big call. That's a big call. And from his reaction, I thought, no, because he would know if he'd been touched. He would know if he'd been filmed. If he got that the touch, and he, from his reaction, I thought, he thinks he's been fouled here. And I was, and then when VAR come on, it's an absolute. But for me, it's absolute penalty. There's no debate that it's a penalty. But apparently there is a debate. Apparently there's quite a few people out there, people who should know better, who are saying it's no penalty. Now, Dougie, your job is to explain to me why that's not a penalty. Can you do that? Or do you think, like me, that was an utter stonewall penalty and the only debate is how come the ref didn't see it first time round?
I said it last week, John. The only reason why there's a debate whether that's a penalty or not is because the player that was brought down in the box was wearing blue. It's as simple as that. There is so much frothing at the mouth right now around every decision that Rangers get. The frustration for me is ever since Rangers called out Willie Collins' abysmal refereeing performance, every penalty that we've been given, I think maybe bar one, since then has had to go to VAR for a second pair of eyes or third pair of eyes to look at it before giving it. It's almost like right now the default position is it's not a penalty to Rangers unless we can absolutely evidence that it is a penalty to Rangers. Now, Fabio Silva throughout the game was very theatrical, and at times I think he was trying to trick the referee, and I think the referee was beginning to get a wee bit annoyed with it. There was one moments before the penalty where he was shouting at the referee that he wanted the decision to go in his favour, and I think the referee was maybe a bit biased in terms of recency bias in terms of the previous instance before him that he thought that Fabio Silva was play acting a little bit. That is right in front of me. I sit in the Copeland right behind the goals. That was right in front of me. The minute it happened, we're all screaming for a penalty. It is a stonewaller. It's as clear as day. And as you say, how anyone can debate it is absolutely beyond me, because there is the argument that he touched the ball first. Just because he had the minor touch of the ball, and as the player is still getting around him, he then fully takes the player out from the kneecaps, doesn't make it acceptable. It is a stonewall penalty, and it's ludicrous that within Scottish football we pay these so-called experts of Chris Sutton, Michael Stewart, to give their expert view on these decisions, because it's not their expert view, it's their green-tinted view that they're given. We can sit here on a podcast right now, as we did, with Ross last week as well, where we looked at incidents like the encroachment at the penalty against Hibs, where we sat honestly and said, well, the rule is the rule. It shouldn't have counted. It might be very, very harsh. It might be the smallest of margin. But do you know what? Unfortunately, it's the right decision. A bit like the Connor Goldson penalty, because we are honest. The green-tinted specks that seem to come out in all these games just really frustrate me, that these guys actually get paid to give their view. It's a stonewall penalty. And then I mentioned it earlier on. It's a great penalty, John. It's a really, really well-taken penalty. And I don't think you can underestimate the pressure that James Tavernier is under in that moment. One, he has had a shocking performance. Two, his team are 2-0 behind in an old firm game that has basically been billed as winner takes all in terms of the league. And three, he's missed his last, 3 penalties? That is a huge pressure moment. And whilst I was critical of Tav because it was his worst performance, that shows me why he's Rangers captain. Because even in his worst performance, he steps up and he didn't take the safe option. He didn't put it down the middle. Mrs. Tavernier told him to go down the middle last week, and I'm very glad he's ignoring Mrs. Tavernier this week, because this week that was pinpoint perfect in the top corner. It was a fantastic penalty, and as you say, you could have 2 keepers in that goal and nobody's saving it. And that goal changed the game for us. It really did. At that moment, the atmosphere in the stadium changed. Because I tell you, see the first half, it was a very, not toxic atmosphere. I wouldn't go as far as toxic, although there was boos of a back pass after 6 minutes, which is never a really good sign. But the atmosphere was very quiet and it wasn't supportive. And I think it was just because we were all shell-shocked at how poor we were.
Yeah.
That penalty and that moment from our captain raised the spirits and the support today.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Bob, before I come to you, I just need to mention our sponsors who are Rangers Prizes, and they have a wonderful prize up for grabs. This week it's the 1972 Rangers champion squad signed shirt. And they've also got 13 instant win prizes to go along with that. So it's a 1972 Rangers shirt from the European Cup Winners' Cup final, and it features signatures from Willie Johnson, Colin Steen, Derek Johnson, Willie Matheson, Dave Smith, Alec MacDonald and Alfie Conn. And on top of that, there are 13 instant win prizes, including a David Weir and Nacho Novo dual signed Rangers shirt. Tickets are £3.95. You can find out more about this if you visit footballprizes.co.uk. Or have a look at the Gersnet Twitter feed, and there's usually a link to it in there. The way it works is only 165 tickets, so you have a really decent chance of winning. Okay, Bob, straight away, it felt like straight away, about 2 minutes later, 3 minutes later, it's two each. And I'm going ballistic at this point, because I, at this point, think, we're going to win this. This is going to be one of these remarkable days. 2 quick goals. We're going to push on. We're going to get a third. What a turnaround this is going to be. It wasn't to be, at least not at that moment. It wasn't to be. Dessers stuck away what was a fairly scrappy goal, it has to be said. It wasn't to be. Dougie mentioned there, we take our blue tinted spectacles off. Dougie's a bigger man than me. I struggle to take my blue tinted spectacles off sometimes. But there was a foul, okay? In my opinion, there was a foul, right? But it was 70 yards away. And Celtic had 3 times Celtic got possession of that ball. Between that foul and that goal. Okay, 4 of their players were involved in that, including their goalkeeper, before that ball went in the net. Okay, now you hear them talk about phases of play. You hear them talk about these things that influenced it. I thought it was a really harsh chalking off. For a foul that happened 70 yards away, to chalk off a goal where their defenders have touched the ball, where their goalkeeper has touched the ball, when they've had literally 3 attempts at clearing it, to then chalk it off, I thought was harsh, and I cannot help but feel if that goal had been for the other team playing today and chalked off, we would be hearing a hell of a lot more about it than we have. What's your take on it, Bob? Are my blue tinted spectacles just a little too blue, or do you feel I'm onto something with this conspiracy theory I'm about to start?
So again, it does come back to phases of play, but before that, I think had that goal stood, there was only ever going to be one winner of that game, because the momentum had just flipped. That was my into and again we were going absolutely mental in the stand until we spotted the VAR intervention. I like to think of myself as fairly balanced in these situations. I think if you look at it, you look at the penalty, and that's a penalty. This is a free kick. This is a free kick, then that's a penalty. Both of them are very, very similar tackles. I think the thing for me is just understanding how far back in an attacking move that referees are going to go back to now. Because ultimately it was a long time, but I don't know if Celtic ever really had control of the ball again. They might have had a couple of touches, but did they ever really have it under control?
4 touches. But
yes, but
it's not our fault that their
think
defender's first touch is not great.
I think I can see why it was chopped off with a couple of the replays. The interesting thing, so I don't know if you've been following the behind the whistles. So it's Des Roach and Steve Conroy have now got a podcast and a Twitter account, and they tend to offer opinion. They thought that Beaton saw the incident, but felt that the ball had been won.
Oh, he absolutely saw the incident. It was literally looking right at it.
So in their opinion, it's a goal that should have stood. But ultimately, it got chopped off. I think you could argue for or against. I think it was really disappointing to see it getting chopped off. But ultimately, when I've looked back and I've seen the foul, it is definitely a free kick. For me, it's just about understanding what constitutes a phase of play and understanding how far back a referee is going to go. I'm not going to sit here and say I know the IFAB rules inside out, so I can't comment on that.
This isn't a Celtic podcast. I don't expect you to know the rules of every aspect of football, accountancy and law. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, but I think it was disappointing, mate. I mean, the euphoria that we gone through, especially after that bloody first half, to then see the usual screening, and also it was then the way that he pointed, because it looked as if he pointed to circle together. So again, we were all got that false hope again until he's like, no, it's a free kick. But again, with the blue tinted specs off, I think definitely a free kick. There's no argument about that. But definitely a free kick. It's very similar to the one that Silva. And by the way, anybody complaining about that Silva penalty needs to go and have a look at themselves, because it's as clear a penalty as you're ever going to see, apart from if you're a ginger BBC reporter or you're Chris Sutton on Sky. It's ridiculous, the bias that comes in when these decisions get given, and nothing the other way when it goes against it. It's just absolutely ridiculous. And until we get rid of that mentality, the Scottish game is never going to grow. Nobody's going to want to tune in and listen to that crap. And it's the reason why things like Gersnet, Heart and Hand are gaining more popularity with people, because at least we give a fair and balanced view on things that happen during the football. We're never going to, we're not going to turn around and deny if there's a penalty or given against us that it's a penalty. But these guys just are making a living out of creating this nonsense. So off track, a little bit of a rant. But the goal was very, very hard. It was harsh to disallow it, but it was a free kick. It'd be interesting to see what's said about that if that's one that gets looked at with Dermot Gallagher, to see around the phases of play and how many would go back on that.
I think it's only fair to say that I am entirely capable of arguing something wasn't when it was. But then I don't work for the BBC. Nobody's paying me to be here. And the very fact that it's called Gersnet gives you a fair idea of where we're going to be coming from in the world. If you want to accuse us of being biased, well, that's absolutely fine. That's because we are.
Are you not getting paid though, John?
No, I'm still an amateur. Yeah, I'm still an amateur. Very much. I'm hoping for getting an S form at some point in the future.
John, just on Rob's point though, around the kind of phase of play, the fact that the referee has seen the incident, the comparison between the incident and what's in the box, I also think it's a foul, right? So see, when you look at it back, I think it's like for like with what's happened in Silva. I think it's a foul. VAR has been brought in for clear and obvious decisions. The referee has seen that live. He's seen it real time, right in front of him. I do think it's the one phase of play because it's the one attack. It's not like we've attacked them, they've kicked it out, we've then attacked them again. There's the touches of the ball, which you're referring to in terms of whether that comes into the kind of phase of play element, is all ricochets and kind of attempts to get to the ball. So I think the goal is rightly not counting. The bit that I think is really, really harsh, and the only point I was going to make here is I just think it's really harsh that the referee has seen it real time, and this is the third Old Firm game this season that we have not won because of a decision made by our officials, and yet it's the Celtic supporters and the ex-Celtic players that are crying about a conspiracy against them. There is an absolute injustice right now in the 3 Old Firm games that have happened this season against Rangers, but yet the narrative still continues that poor old Celtic have been hard done by. It is absolutely mental to think that that's what's going through their head right now.
Yeah, you do. I mean, the point I was going to make there was that yes, of course we're biased, and we're amateurs. We do this for fun, but you do expect people who are paid on a national broadcaster to know the rules. You expect them to know the rules. Whether they are happy about something or not is neither here nor there. They do know they should know the rules. They should understand what constitutes a penalty and what doesn't. So it wasn't to be with Dessers, but thankfully it was to be, and a second goal did come a little later. Matondo, in a moment that gave us an idea of what might be coming later. Matondo cuts in from the left. I don't actually know if he was actually shooting or if he was actually crossing. I'm not entirely sure. But it got blocked and it falls to a big Abdullah, who hits it first time. It takes a wicked deflection into the top corner, and we, that way where I'm up, I'm shouting, and I'm looking for a flag, I'm looking for VAR, I'm looking for, could anything possibly have happened there? Was somebody blocking the goalie? And, what could have happened there? And I wasn't able to just fully enjoy it until, it took me a moment. But the second goal, we were definitely worthy of it. In the second half performance, when we were far the better team. What was your take on it? You must have had a pretty decent view of it.
Yeah, great view again, John. I'm entirely with you actually, and I think it's a great point around VAR. VAR is killing the emotion inside the ground. See that second goal that went in from Dessers? I am like Rob. Rob mentioned the euphoria that he had when it went in, and then when the referees pointed towards the centre spot, that euphoria there. I'm on top of my dad. I am going absolutely mental thinking we've just equalised. And at that point, I think we go on to win the game comfortably because of the way that the momentum's going. And everybody feels it. VAR then kills that emotion. So it then means when the next goal goes in from Sima, my instinct as well was to go and look at the officials and think, right, what you cutting this one off for now? Because that's the mentality that I have, is like, instead of going away and celebrating that moment, enjoying the moment, I'm thinking, right, you've just cost us the last goal. What are you going to cost us now? Yeah. And I think that's a very, very big point around VAR. That's not what VAR's there for. VAR is there for the clear and obvious, not to ruin the experience for the paying supporters. But anyway, that's a separate point. The point being, the goal went in, made it 2 each. It was massively deserved. The contrast between the first half and the second half was so evident, and up to that point, we deserved that equaliser. I've spoken about my praise for Sima a number of occasions on this platform, on Twitter. That's what Seema's great at. Seema's more of an inside forward rather than a winger, and he's one of these guys that seems to always find himself in the right place. And when you look at the phase of play, I think it's a cross from Matondo. But what Seema does so cleverly is Seema doesn't just charge into the back post and aimlessly run into a group of Celtic players. He actually drops back. As you see all the Celtic players all kind of creating a line, he drops back and creates the space. So when the ball comes back out again, it ricochets right to his feet, and it deflected. It wasn't a particularly great finish. But I tell you what, the only thing that matters is it hit the top corner, it hit the back of the net.
Well, we were due some luck. Let's be honest. We were due some luck because we hadn't carried much before that. Yeah.
Well, they had every rub of the green. There was a moment shortly before that where we had a corner and they went to clear it and it ricocheted off Tom Lawrence and it went over the bar.
Yeah.
And it was almost like identical to what Tav did with Kyogo, but theirs, rattled into the back of the net, ours flew over the bar. That's the small margins in football. Sometimes you need that luck on your side, John. And
absolutely, yeah.
In this occasion, we got it. But I think massive credit needs to go to Sima because he's coming back from a serious injury after AFCON. He's not played a lot of football. He was rusty at points, but I tell you what, Celtic feared Sima today.
Yeah.
I said it last week. Nobody fears playing Scott Wright. So when Scott Wright's on that park,
I fear it. But yeah,
we fear it. I fear it the minute I see him in the team sheet. But teams don't get pinned back because they think, we can't press up against James Tavernier because Scott Wright will break on us. immediately when Seema was on that park, you seen Celtic had to drop deeper. Greg Taylor wasn't going forward as much.
I actually thought they'd taken Maeda off in the second half because he became anonymous, and I thought, is he actually still in the park? And because in that change, and he'd been such a thorn on our side in the first half.
Yeah, and this is a Rangers podcast, right? We're here to talk about Rangers, but whilst I've said that the contrast of Rangers' performance first to second half was stark, so was Celtic's. You know, to give Celtic their due, I thought Celtic were excellent first half. I really do. I thought whilst they got two fairly fortuitous goals, one from the penalty spot, one from a freak deflection, their intricate passing was very neat. You know, they were very tidy in possession. You compare that to ours, we were treating that ball like a bomb. You know, Diamonde, I've not spoken about yet, he kept giving the ball away. That in the second half, though, Celtic were not in the races the second half, and I've got a few. Rob and I share a Celtic supporting mate in common, and he's normally pretty good at assessment. I actually seen his comments on Twitter, and he was actually saying that Celtic this season have done that a lot. You know, they've went out first half, they've blown teams away by getting a 2-3 goal lead, and then it's allowed them to kind of, you know, stroll through the second half. I think that's what they expected. I think they thought, we've got our 2 goals. Second half, they've kind of, you know, they've emptied the tank first half, so to speak, and they thought we'll stroll to a defeat, and I think we caught them massively off guard. And whilst we're here to talk about Rangers, I think Celtic's second half performance was very, very poor.
Yeah, well, let's keep talking about Celtic because they scored almost instantly and killed that buzz. You know, again, another one of these goals. Yeah, it wasn't as ridiculous as the first two, but it was our fault. And I guess what I'm going to ask you, Bob, is who are we blaming for this? Because I want someone to blame. I always need someone to blame when Celtic score against us. Dowell lost his man. Is it Bernardo? Is that what they call him? You know, he seemed to kind of, I don't know, he just lost him and then strolled back. And I gave him the freedom of the half. He just was running with tons of space in front of him. He got to pick his pass to the striker. You know, striker's got 2 Rangers players on him. Now, the striker had an option. There was another Celtic player on the outside of him, but you know, he got his shot away. It went through Sterling's legs. I don't really blame him for that. But with 2 players on him, I don't feel he should have got the shot away as easily as he did. And I also thought Butland was a little suspect for their third goal. I just didn't think he covered himself in glory there. Am I being harsh on everybody there, Bob, or are you with me on this take?
No, I'm with you. I think you could see, you know, when in the transition, Dowell was very slow to get back. Lundstrom's trying to come back and cover. You know, we don't get near Bernardo at all. You know, the pass into Ida is a decent pass, but then you've got Suter and Sterling who are both there. I kind of think probably getting each other's way a little bit. You know, Sterling's coming across to try and block or make a tackle and kind of doesn't quite get there. But I also felt that at this goal, Butland probably could have done a little bit better. I mean, it was a very cleanly struck shot that was straight at him, and he just couldn't sort his feet out in time. But I think it was again just a comedy of errors between you know, not tracking back, not putting pressure on the player with the ball, and then, you know, getting a tackle in when it was needed most. Now, what I will say about Sterling, you know, I think it was just before that, and he put in a fantastic tackle. I think it was in Yang, who'd come on the pitch. That was a certain goal, but it was a phenomenal bit of defending, and he kind of injured himself in the process of doing that.
Yeah.
So, you know, we can find faults and look to blame players for individual mistakes, but we also need to recognise when they've had a good game. And Dougie said, you know, Sterling for playing as a left back today, had a pretty solid game. But again, I think it was just it was probably down to nobody taking responsibility of communicating with each other and saying one go to man and one cover the pass out wide in case you're worried about that as well. So disappointing goal we concede again. It was a good strike by the boy, but it's not a goal we should be conceding, especially after. No, not after getting it back to 2 each. Because the first thing I said to the boys next to me was, right, we need to keep it tight now. And like 2 minutes later, we're 3-2 down again. At
2 each, with 2 minutes to go in injury time, plus injury time, I'm thinking there's only one winner, and it's us. I think I'm thinking that's not the stuff at them, and it was the opposite. It really was very disappointing, but it had a happy ending. I think I still can't decide if it had a happy ending, but it had a hell of a better ending than it could have had. When Rabbi Matondo did what he did last week, did what he had almost done 5 minutes or 10 minutes before, and scores as good a goal as you'll see anywhere. It's a fantastic piece of football. To cut inside at that area, and that's a full box. Celtic are back in numbers. To cut inside and stick it into the top corner away from a keeper who's 6'4", 6'5". Inch perfect. Dougie, absolute inch perfect. And Matondo's a funny player. He's one of my son's favourite players. I'm not really too sure why. We went to see them. Was it West Ham we played in a pre-season friendly? And one of Matondo's first games. It was great. And we all thought, oh wow, you've picked up a bargain here. Yeah, he wasn't so good for the rest of the season. But to be fair to him, he's contributed this season, particularly since Clement's come in. And his contribution today could prove to be awfully important when all is said and done. Beautiful goal. What's your take on Matondo these days? Not just his goal today, but his kind of overall contribution. Is he going to make it at Rangers?
I think there's certain games that will suit Matondo. We spoke about it last week. I think he's an impact player. I think in games like today where there's space behind, there's legs hiding, he's a great option to come off the bench. It's 2 weeks in a row he's scored really good goals, and I've watched his post-match press conference where he referenced why he ran to the manager after he gets the goal, and it's the comparison with Kevin De Bruyne.
Yeah,
apparently the manager's been working on cutting in, having those shots, but
having his finishing.
He gave him the feedback to keep it low because he said it's safer. You've got less margin for error, whereas when you kick it high, it can go over the bar, etc. Matondo has been very confident to take that shot. I tell you who deserves a lot of praise in that goal. It's Todd Cantwell.
Yeah. I know why.
It goes under the radar because Matondo does very well with the finish. But in the build-up to that goal, Todd Cantwell has two really crucial moments that brings that ball up and allows the ball to get eventually to Matondo. He plays a very, very big role in that goal. When it gets to Matondo, I'm a wee bit like, I actually think it was Chris Sutton that I did here say this, and I don't often agree with Sutton, but I do agree in terms of it's a fantastic finish. Very surprised he gets so much space to get the shot away, because of all the things that Matondo's good at, as a right-footed left winger with great pace, he's very, very good at shimmying in and getting the shot away from that angle. He did it last week against Hibs, and it's almost a direct replica this week.
Yeah.
It's better. It's more powerful. It's more in the corner. It's more in the air. It's a sensational finish. In terms of how we're feeling, at that moment, it's sheer joy, right? So I am over the moon when that ball hits the net. And the reason why I'm over the moon when that ball hits the net is that game today, whilst it's one game, league titles can be won and lost in one game.
Yeah.
If Celtic won that game, I think Celtic go on and win the league.
Yeah, so do I. I think you're right.
Right now it's 50-50. Now, we'll come on and we'll talk about it a wee bit later. Right now it's 50-50 because of the run of games ahead. That goal keeps us in a title chase. And, last week I mentioned that we pay £28,000 a week apparently for Matondo, and I question whether he's worth that. I tell you what, if that's the goal and that's the moment that keeps us in a title chase and we go on and we win the title, he's worth every single penny. And I can shut up about people's weekly wages, because as supporters we're here to judge them on what they do on the park, not whether they're justifying their income and all that good stuff. Yeah. He saved our bacon today, Johnny. He dug us out a very deep hole with that goal, and even when that went in, I actually thought towards the end we could have nicked it again.
I thought Dessers had won it. I thought Dessers had won it. Absolutely, that shot at the end I thought was in. And I think you made a very good point there, Dougie. I think had we lost that game today, I think that was the league. The league wasn't lost today, but I think psychologically it puts Celtic in a very, very strong position. It puts it in their hands. We'll come to, we might not, looking at the time. we might not speak about Dundee, but if we can win our game in hand, that puts us in the driving seat. Celtic then have to win against us, assuming both teams win the rest of their games, which of course is no foregone conclusion. It could be an absolutely monumental goal. We'll just have to see. Time will tell. Look, I am conscious of time. I'm conscious we're well over our hour, but I'm hoping Frankie isn't going to cut us off because we have a couple of things I want to still talk about. Tav and Goldson were poor today. I don't think there's any other way to describe it. We've all mentioned it so far. Dougie mentioned something which I didn't know about, this potential bug that was going around. I think it was Clement that said that's why Barisic didn't make it, that he'd had a bug through the week, and that's why he just wasn't fit enough to start. They weren't themselves. Goldson, as I said, Goldson came off in the 93rd minute or something, so that wasn't tactical. We weren't trying to waste time. So, for Goldson to come off in the 93rd minute, clearly something wrong, whether he's carrying a knock, whether he's got a bug in that. But neither of them, I thought, were great today. And Butland had a strange game. Butland, if you look at the BBC website, Butland was man of the match. That's just like, really? And yet, I thought he had a hand in their first goal, and I thought he could have done more at the third. But at the same time, if it hadn't been for him, the game was lost. The game would have been lost in the first half. We would have gone in 3 or 4 down. We had 2 or 3 exceptional saves in the first half. It was a strange game. But there are 3 guys that we have relied on pretty much all season. There are 3 people who put in performances week in, week out. What happened today, Bob? What can you put your finger on? Now that you've had a few hours, now that the euphoria of last minute equalisers, or not quite, but injury time equalisers has passed. What's your take? What do you feel? What was wrong with them?
It's a difficult one to answer, to be honest. I mean, that is certainly in the first half. That's probably the worst 45 I've seen from Tav. I think everything he attempted to do today in that first half just didn't come off. He was continually caught on the ball. The decision making for their goal to start with in the first 20 seconds you could question, because he could easily play that ball back to Butland potentially. There's a number of different things that potentially impacts in that. Like Dougie said, you've got to give him credit for the balls that he's demonstrated by stepping up and taking that penalty when there's a lot of pressure on him. So I think, ultimately these guys are going to have off days. I think if you look over the contribution that he's given over the season, you can't ask any more than that for a right back. The amount of goals, the assists, time and time again, when a big moment is needed, he'll be there to step up and deliver a key moment for us. So you can almost forgive him a little bit. And ultimately it comes back for, you play to a player's strength and you put players in that team that help cover his weaknesses. And I think the combination of him and Wright just doesn't work, because Wright doesn't cover, when it's needed. I think Goldson, it was an interesting one today because, again, his distribution was terrible. He does what he normally does, which is sometimes he'd take too long on the ball and dilly-dally. But again, you can't be too critical of him for that, because there was then no movement for anybody for him to give the ball to. Yeah. So he's got no option but to hang on to it, which makes him look worse. I think towards the end he did look really tired, and I think Ida probably got the better of him, and I wouldn't have expected him to be able to kind of bully Goldson in some of the situations.
I thought Ida was a balloon. I didn't rate him at all, but he took his goal well today and he gave us a bit of bother when he came on.
Yeah, and if there is a bit of a bug going around the squad, then it would certainly give us a reason why he's probably flagged a little bit towards the end of the game. But ultimately, I think the other thing comes down to his competition for places. You've got to have players that are going to push these guys week in, week out to be in the top of their game or give them a rest when needed. And we don't really have another centre-back in the club that I think, apart from Balogun, and he's just coming back from an injury, and Clement has been looking to try and give him minutes. You can't just throw him into a game like that today. So I think ultimately it demonstrates that we need a bit of competition in those positions to push those players to get even better and continue to hit that top form. Otherwise, you're going to have the odd day. Tav last week talked about getting the 3 teeth out, whether he's still feeling the after effects of that and not being able to fuel his body the way he normally would because he couldn't eat much. He was on, MASH or whatever it was last week. So you can make a number of reasons and try and defend them. Ultimately, they had a bad day at the office. Everybody's going to do that. The problem will
just be good if they didn't do it against Celtic. That would be my take on that. And I'm not having toothache being the reason why he didn't clear that ball in the 22nd second. But I take the point you're making, Bob. I take the point you're making. I think that's dead on. Listen, I'll tidy up. We'll tidy up today's game. Dougie, and I don't know the answer to this, so I'm unsure. Was that a point saved or 2 points dropped? Who takes the most from today's game? Us or them? Because I'm really not sure.
I think it's them, John. And I've taken some reflection post game to come to that conclusion, because in the aftermath of euphoria, when we get that late equaliser, I'm in cloud nine. I'm buzzing. We've saved our season effectively. When you take the emotion out of it and you reflect on what's left of the season, we now have 7 games to play, only 2 of which are at home, and 1 is at Celtic Park. We haven't beaten Celtic this season. I think it would be very unusual for a team to go and win the league having never won an Old Firm game. No team has won all 5 post-split fixtures. So I think there's a lot to be played for between now and the end of the season. I think the absolute must right now is that we go and win our next 2 fixtures before we go into the split. Once we get into the split, though, we're going to have a monumental effort, because I think Celtic could get 5 out of their... Is it 4? Sorry, 4 out of their next 6 games at home. We are 2 of our next 7 at home. I think there's a lot of things that now favour Celtic. And that raises serious questions around the split and whether the split is fair. I seen something earlier on. It said if Dundee do get into the top 6, it would mean that every single team would play 19 games home and away. That makes it fair because you've got that equality. But we are now at the key point of a season and we only have 2 home games. Celtic have 4. That for me is not fair. It is now up to our players to go and show that they want this title, because at half-time I put a tweet out questioning their heart for a title chase. They showed me up to a degree, second half, with how we came back into the game. We now need to go and prove that we want this league title with the remaining fixtures. And it's not going to be a mean feat. But what I would say, just to kind of close my point off, is Tav and Goldson were poor. There was a number of poor performances across the piece. Even just looking at the comments, there's so much criticism and so many people saying that they need to come out of the next fixture. I just urge everyone to remain calm. These are the players that have got us into this position. Reflecting on what Rob said earlier on, we were left an absolute mess post Michael Beale. Coincidental, big Sam Lammer scored again today. That's now 6 in his last 5 games. But we were left an absolute mess, and Clement has worked wonders to get us into this position, but he's done it with this group of players. Now is not the time to be dropping Tav for Sterling at right back or taking Goldson out the team and putting Balogun in. But having said that, I actually think the Goldson substitution was a massive statement of intent from the manager. I think he was pulling Goldson up for his performance and showing that he was making an example of him. In my opinion, I don't think it was anything fitness related or sickness related. And hopefully, we've seen it at half time, the power that Clement has in terms of getting his point across and motivating his players. Hopefully that one works. Hopefully Clement learns from what went well today, what didn't go so well. And hopefully we now go in a very strong winning run and bring the trophy home. But it's going to need a massive, monumental push from everyone. I know I said that was my last point. My last
No
point.
one believes you, Dougie. Don't worry about it.
Is by the time we play Celtic at Celtic Park, the starting 11 will be unrecognisable, and that needs noted. You know, that team today was picked on availability. Hopefully, as we go into the split, we have even more players back, even more players ready to push on and give us a fighting chance of winning this. You know, we get Seema up to speed, potentially Cantwell back in the starting 11, Rid van Yilmat's back in the team again. All of a sudden, we have a very strong starting 11, and hopefully that strong starting 11 leads us to title 56.
Yeah, well, we'll wait and see. Bob, we're way over time. Very, very quickly. Dundee midweek. Dundee need a win to stay or to secure top 6. And, you know, the pitch will be shocking, let's be honest. You know, I think we'll toss up and see which one of us gets to start in the shallow end and which one of us has to start in the deep end. It's one of those kind of pitches. I imagine it's going to be like a ploughed field. Potentially our most important away match of the season so far. Although I hadn't actually realised we had so many away games coming up. But, you know, this is a potentially our most important. You know, win this and we go top of the league. Simple as that. Do you see changes for the match? How do we approach that match? You know, last word on this for you.
Well, I think first of all, it depends on whether the match is going to go ahead or not. You know, you look at the forecast, and allegedly there's meant to be heavy rain in Dundee all of Tuesday. You know, if that happens, that pitch ain't going to be in a fit state to be played on. You know, the game at the weekend probably shouldn't have gone ahead if you seen some of the pictures from the pitch inspection. Dundee are obviously going to need a win to get into that top 6. So they'll be going hell for leather. I think for us, it is a massive, massive game because it puts us back top of the league, 2 points clear. I think hopefully we can see either Ridvan or Bonner come in to give us that bit more balance. You know, could it be that you then slot Big Dujon into the centre mid alongside Lundstrom to give us a bit more steel that might be needed on a pitch like that, because it's not going to be pretty football that wins you that game. It's going to be rolling the sleeves up and taking your chances when they come. Like Dougie says, I think the team kind of picks itself at the moment, but regardless whoever steps on that pitch, the only job is to win. You know, it doesn't matter how we do it. It doesn't matter how many goals to a certain extent that we score. The only thing that we need to do is to beat Dundee. We beat Dundee, we go into the split 2 points clear, which when Clement took over, I would have bitten your hand off because I didn't think we would have ever been in this position.
I would have bitten your hand off. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's going to be an interesting one to see whether that does actually go ahead or not.
Yeah. Okay. Listen, guys, I really do appreciate you giving up your time tonight. Dougie, I know you were a late call off the bench.
Abdallah Seema of Gersnet.
Abdallah Seema of Gersnet. And Bob, I don't know, who are you? The Dujon Sterling of Gersnet?
I've said nothing.
The Hugh Burns of Gersnet. That's a debate for another night. But listen, guys, thanks for giving up your time tonight, and I appreciate you giving up quite a bit of time tonight. So thanks for coming on. Thank you for listening. If you are indeed listening, thanks for listening, whether you're listening live or whether you're listening on catch up. Just remember that you can catch this podcast and all the Gersnet podcasts on Acast, iTunes, YouTube, Castbox, Stitcher, and of course Spotify. There are 2 planned podcasts this week. There is going to be a preview and a review of the Dundee game and a preview of the Ross County game. Currently Craig, Scott and Ben. And then next Sunday there should be a review of the game with Brian, Chris and Grant. As ever, if you've enjoyed this, please subscribe, follow Frankie's Gersnet on Twitter, and subscribe so you don't miss any of the stuff we're doing. Thanks very much for what has been an eventful day. Thanks for watching. Good night.